Okay, so welcome back. We're on our journey through Nach, and we're so excited to be going now through Nach, Yehoshua, perek Gimel, the third perek in Yehoshua. Most people kind of stop once they get through the first or second perek. We're going as well. This perek is not a haftarah. So that means to say that most people are not aware of what happens in this week's perek. Our perek, just to look at it from a begadol in a large setting, is 17 psukim long. And it deals with the most fascinating episode, one of the most fascinating episodes that occurs in Sefer Yehoshua. We're going to see many, actually, which are fascinating. But here's one of the really interesting ones, which is about crossing the Yarden, crossing the Jordan River. We're going to look at just a general overview and then try to dig deeper into some of the main issues, which will actually be very instrumental in the way that we look at the rest of Nach, because this is going to serve as a paradigm for how we understand Nach in general. So we start at the beginning, and we're told that Yehoshua wakes up in the morning. So if you just put yourself back into context, he's received the report of the spies. These are two spies come back from Jericho. They report that after having avoided the pursuing forces, that the people are terrified. People are really scared about this going on. So therefore, now they make their plans. The beginning of the third day, they get up and he tells the shotrim. The shotrim seem to be the officers who are in charge of galvanizing the people, making sure they're doing what they're supposed to. And he tells them the following: you're going to see the Aron, the Ark of the Covenant, and it's going to go in front of you, and you're going to follow it. But he tells them, but wait, there's going to be a little bit of a gap is how you follow it. Look at Pasuk Dalet. We're not going to do all the Psukim, but he says in Pasuk Dalet, you'll follow it at 2,000 cubits, right? Which is a pretty large amount of space. You're going to follow the Ark of the Covenant. You're going to follow it. It's going to go, and you've never gone through this path before. You, as people, have never walked this path, so you need to follow it to know where to go. That's the instructions, the preparations. Then he turns to more specific instructions in Pasuk Hey and Vav. He says, "Vayama Yehoshua la'am hiskadashu." How would you translate that word? Hiskadashu. Make yourselves prepared, holy. Right, so make yourselves holy or prepared. Ki machar yaseh Hashem b'kirbachem nifla. God is going to do a nifla tomorrow. Just an interesting way of how do you translate the word nifla? We usually try to translate it as miracle or wonder, right? But it is worthwhile noting that there is a difference between a nes and a pele. A nes seems to be going out of the way of nature. That's one definition of it. And a pele is just a amplification of nature. So he's saying an amplification is going to happen. We'll see what that means. If you go through the 10 makos, some of them are, as an example, nisim. As an example, let's say the barad, where you have fire and water together. That's a nes. The frogs, the pele, really, right? The frogs is just an amplification of what already exists. So something is going to happen like that. And vayomer Yehoshua lakohanim le'emor su'u es aron habris v'yivru lifnei ha'am v'yisu es aron habris v'yelchu lifnei ha'am. Pick up the Ark of the Covenant. You're going to go in front of the people. So this is the plans that he tells them. Then he tells them to set aside 12 people. If you scoot down to Pasuk Yud Beis at the bottom of the page, so you're going to be 12 men, one from each tribe. Sounds a little bit like the Meraglim again, but we're going to see their job is going to be next perek. Adon kol aretz b'mei Yarden. When the people carrying the Kohanim who carry the Aron enter into the Jordan River, Mei Yarden yikarei sun. They will be cut off. Hamaim yordim ilamala vayamdu neidecha. They're going to stand in a single pillar as well. And this is what happens in Pasuk Tesvav. If we skip, as their feet just touch the water. And the river was full. It was not the end of this was not a dry season, because remember, this is happening in which month? Nisan. This is happening in the month of Nisan. Nisan is the end of the rainy season, because remember, when do we stop saying Morid Atal, Mashivarach, Morid Geshem? When do we stop saying the Santal Matar? Is at Pesach time, because that's the end of the rainy season. So this is the peak. If you ever want to go whitewater rafting, right? The most dangerous time to go is around April, because that's when all the snow's just melted, right? The rivers are at their highest. So the springtime is when the rivers are the fullest. Okay, so what he said, the Tanakh is emphasizing this was not like, a dry river, the end of, September. That's the dry season in Israel. It's full, and Vayarden Mole al Kol Gorosav, and Vayamdu Hamayim Hayardim Elamala, Komu Neidechad Harchek Ma'od, but Me'adam Ha'ir, Asher Mitzad Tzarason, and the river stood up by a place called Adam Ha'ir, and that was further upstream, and it stood in one long pillar. Asher Mitzad Tzarason, Vayardim al Yamar Hava, Yom HaMelech Tamu, Nichrasu Va'am Avru Neged Yericho, and the people crossed before Jericho. This is one of my favorite misperceptions in Tanakh, is people say that the Jordan River split. It never split. Rivers don't split. Seas have to split because there's water on both sides. Rivers just stop, right? And when it stops, the rest of the river goes away because that which was flowing goes down to the sea, and there's nothing on the other side. In fact, just for interest, when I generated the AI picture on the front page there, I asked for the nation of Israel passing through the Jordan, and it gave me two sides of the water. So that is incorrect. I had to remove one of the sides of the water from the picture because rivers don't have two sides. It's not like the Red Sea. We'll get there in a second as to the comparison to the Red Sea. But nonetheless, that is what we have. And the nation of Israel stood, and the entire time the Kohanim are standing in the river, so they're sort of standing on the banks, and everybody's passing around them because in a certain sense, their presence with the ark is causing the river to split. This is why our perek, it's a short perek. We'll come back to next week, what happens afterwards, how they get out, and so on. Let's do a few basics quickly. Just to come back to our maps again. So we know that if you look at the map, the nation of Israel at a place called Shittim, which is in the Aravois Moab, this is the plains of Moab. That's on the right-hand side, the east bank of the Jordan, this orientation of the map. And they are now crossing the Jordan just above the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, to get to a place called Gilgal, which is going to be just north of Jericho. So this is where we are. The splitting of the Jordan is essentially just to if you're to come down Route 1 from Jerusalem to the Jordan Valley, take a left on Route 90 and look to your right. That is where the Jordan River would have split. Good. This is what we have. Let's do a few basic questions. A few basic questions over here. Number one is, why is the ark going first? Like, why is the Aaron coming along first in this episode? So the truth is that we don't need to go too far. We can just go back to Parshas Baha'aloischa, and the Torah tells us why the ark goes first. We actually have the basic moving protocol, the operation of how Israel travels, and it says. We forget this, but it says, when they moved from Har Sinai, they did a 3-day tour. So the ark went ahead of them the space of 3 days to find them a resting place. So meaning the ark is always going to be the which goes first. And the cloud covers them, and the next pasuk is, right? When the ark travels, then Moshe says, the ark is going to be that which spreads away the enemies from in front of us, clearing us the way. So we know that in a certain sense, we are picking up from Parshas Baha'aloischa. That's pretty remarkable, because think about this for a moment. Why was there a break? Why was there a break from there to now? The answer is, well, they complained. And then they had this whole business called Kivras HaTa'ava. They complained twice, Asafsuf and the Kivras HaTa'ava in Baha'aloischa. Then they sent spies in. They maligned the land, and were stuck there for 40 years. In a certain sense, Yehoshua is picking up from where they should have been, which is the Aaron going first. Vayi bin so Aaron vayomem Moshe. Now it's happening. That's pretty dramatic, right? We're now connecting back to Plan A. Plan B took a little while, a little bit of a detour. We're now back. The Aaron's going first. They're spreading. The enemies are going away in front of them. This is what's happening. It's pretty amazing, right? This is where we're picking up. Why is there this 2,000 amma gap? Why would you say there's this break between the Aaron, the ark, and the people? So I would have thought it's an element of respect. That's what Rashi says. Rashi says it's because you have to have the requisite, awe, the requisite fear, the requisite capacity of understanding what the holiness of the ark is. This is not just like, a parade, a float. and you're like all surrounding it. This is the Ark of the Covenant. This is God's word in the on the tablets. That's what I always thought. But the Abarbanel has a slightly different perspective, and he says, "V'shekavanasihi." The Abarbanel observes, "Shoysa hasibabazeh." The reason is lefi sheyiru godel hanes. He wanted them to see the greatness of the miracle, and the Abarbanel goes on to say that if you're right on top of it, you won't see it. Think about that for a moment. So now, every step backwards, please, behind the red line. The ark is going to go forward and step into the Jordan. The Jordan is now going to stop running. You will now be able to see it. But if you're all running around, scampering around the ark, you're not going to even know what happened. Right? So, and I think that Abarbanel is saying a profound observation is that when you want to see big things in life, you do need to take a step backwards. You can't see it when you're in it. Right? Sometimes it's such a chaos that's going on around you, you don't even realize. And then maybe whether that step backwards is in time or space. He's saying here in space. Right? Take a step backwards to see what happens to the Jordan. But in time for ourselves, is sometimes we need time, that space in time, to see what really happened in our lives. To reflect on this. There's going to be books that are written on the 12-day war in Iran. There are going to be books which are going to be written about what happened in that time. But when we were going through it, it was amazing. But I don't think we fully appreciated what was happening. And 20 years plus of planning and everything that had to fall into place for this to work, we need space. So Abarbanel is saying, take a step backwards, understand what's going on over here from a larger perspective. It makes so much sense when it comes to this as well. There is another hidden ark over here, which I did not realize until I was learning it this time. I've learned this a number of times myself, and every time I come back, it just keeps getting better because there's more things that I get to see, right? The Torah has an infinite amount of depth, and so every time we keep reinvestigating, we see more and more. Rashi makes an observation that there's a strange pronoun here in this text, and that is that it says that if you look into pasuk Daled, where it describes the gap, it says, "Achrachok yeh beinechem ubeinov." There'll be a gap between you and it, right? So what is the it? Rashi makes an observation what does it mean ubeinov? And between them, it's actually not it, but rather them, beinov. Right, so what does that mean? Rashi says maybe it means beinoi, meaning maybe it means in singular. But Daimelo, and he quotes another pasuk of Yisrael, Yismach Yisrael ba'osav, Israel will rejoice in her creator. It doesn't mean creators. It refers to creators. It means singular, even though there's an extra yud in that pronoun. But he makes another observation, and he doesn't say where he gets this from, but he says, Davar acher beis aronos hayu. Maybe there was a gap between them, the nation of Israel, and them, the arks. There was a second ark. What does that mean? Shel Shechina, the ark of the covenant, the Shel Yosef, Mahalchin Yachad, and the ark, which we would call today the casket of Yosef, which was traveling with it. And this actually does harken back to a number of midrashim which describe that in the desert, the two arks, or the two containers, the two boxes, moved together, the Ark of the Covenant and the bones of Yosef. Now, by the way, it happens to be there were a number of coffins that were coming along on their way, right? We know the rest of the tribes as well were also being carried, but Yosef was specifically the one who demanded that as a request that his bones would be exhumed and taken back to Israel, and we know that was one of the things that Moshe Rabbeinu specifically did upon leaving. The Midrash fills in the subtext over that, and it's fascinating. But what to me over here is that there's a little bit of an echo over here, and I think what Rashi is identifying over here is a phenomenal insight into understanding this entire episode just by dropping us this very unusual fact. And here's how it goes. You see, we say this in Hallel all the time, and this moment is really so powerful. Is we say in Hallel in the second paragraph, Hayom Ra'a Vayanos, Hayarden Yisov La'achar. The sea saw and fled. That refers to the Sea of Reeds. Hayarden, the Jordan River, Yisov La'achar, sort of moved backwards in fear almost. And so what the pasuk in Tehillim is doing is it's equating the splitting of the Red Sea and the ceasing of the Jordan River from moving, right? So clearly the two are being equated over here, and in Tehillim, and we're sort of reflecting on the miracles of God in both those episodes. It happens to be that we're personifying the sea in this way. So, like in literary theory, what you're doing is you're saying the sea saw, right? So the sea is being personified as if it has its own personality and has human attributes. So what did it see? The Midrash asks. And there's a number of observations the Yalkut Shimoni says. One of the observations which is made on this pasuk is Ma Ra Arona Shel Yosef. It saw the coffin of Yosef, meaning what caused the Red Sea to split was the coffin of Yosef. Why the coffin of Yosef, out of all things that the sea saw to split? So it's based on actually a play on words, because it says that in describing Yosef, it says Vayonos hachutza. Yosef ran outside, meaning when he was confronted with Mrs. Potiphar, she was propositioning him. He runs outside and describes how the water recedes in a certain parallel to what Yosef was doing. You say, well, okay, besides the word game, is there any more philosophy to this? The answer is absolutely. Is Yosef at that point in time was a person who lost his entire heritage. He doesn't have his family around him. He has every reason in the world to say, that's it, I'm done. Moral scruples of dad's house, I don't think so anymore. They don't care about me so much. And besides, here I'm in the house. I'm Mr. Potiphar's, right-hand man. And now she's propositioning me. Who in the world will know? Everybody is in the marketplace. And yet, against everything in which in the male hormones flowing through his body at that moment will tell him one thing. He managed to break his nature and not succumb to what was actually morally incorrect at that time. And so therefore, in a certain sense, there's another moment in time where nature will also break itself. Meaning, because a human being broke his nature, that set the mark, or set the standard for nature breaking its, meaning water always follows gravity, right? But there's going to be a time where it doesn't. It's going to break its nature because we as the nation of Israel broke our nature, which means the schus, because if you look at the beginning of Parshas B'Shach, it describes that they bring the bones of Yosef, they arrive at the dead at the Red Sea, and then it goes on to describe what happens to the ensuing splitting of the sea. What's fascinating over here is by Rashi inserting the bones of Yosef again by the Jordan, what Rashi is doing is setting up an entire parallel. He's now closing the loop in this pasuk here of the parallel between the sea splitting and the Yarden standing still, which is going to be so significant because we're going to see so many similarities and so many contrasts between Moshe Rabbeinu's beginning of his leadership of the people and Yehoshua's beginning of his leadership of the people. And over here, this is a parallel. The Tanakh is clearly setting this up, that this is going to be the way that Yeshua's greatness is seen is through this, like Moshe was seen, so much so that there are going to be so many parallels. It's going to be, there wasn't an ark then of the covenant because they had not made it yet. There wasn't the tablets because they hadn't been given yet, but there was the ark of Yosef, and that's by Rashi inserting that inside, he's clearly relating us back to the banks of the Red Sea. Phenomenal, right? Just to understand the harmony that Rashi is adding into this melody.
Actually. It's even beyond the
yes,
in a way, right?
It is.
There's a chazal on the midbar that says, why, Kiyam zeh masher kosu b'zeh.
Yes, very good.
The Rav says, fantastic.
Excellent.
Yosef is called Yosef Tzaddik. He epitomizes
meaning Yosef, what is in this casket was one who lived by what was in that casket, right? So there you have the parallel of these two arcs. Just fascinating. Again, Rashi is just commenting on one extra yud here, where it seemed to suggest a them. Why a them? So Rashi on the first hand redacts it by saying it really means it, not them. But the second one says maybe there was a second ark. And it's also a play on the words in Hebrew with the word Aron. We also describe as like a cabinet, right? That's one of the words for it. But Aron also means a coffin, right? And so that's where this parallel comes in. Fascinating over here. We'll get to the 12 men later on. But now the preparation. So Yehoshua says, get ready and prepare. Tomorrow something really impressive is going to happen. So what are they preparing for? So the most mundane level, the Radak says, is look, you got, arguably at least 3 million people, right? So there's 600,000 men, and they're married, right? And this is only a marriage, that's 1.2 million. Let's assume just like, a neat American family of 2 kids, right? right? So we're now push that up, double that to 2.4. We're definitely more people than that, right? So we're talking about burgeoning more than 3 million people, and you want them to move. Do you know the logistics of getting Jews to move? Try to think about putting the kids on the campus. It's impossible, right? So his kadoshu means, folks, pack up your tents, get your snacks, make sure that his kadoshu just means, folks, we're moving, let's get ready to go. We don't want to leave anybody behind. The most basic level is of preparation. But the Malbim says it's not that. It's that you need, his kadoshu comes from the word kadosh, which means holy, is you need to be willing to receive this miracle. Prepare yourself spiritually for this. You can't just be sitting there, this is not like pull out the popcorn and just watch what's going to happen. Do something. Do something to warrant this over here. God doesn't do this every day. So do something to warrant your deserving of this experience, which is so profound. And now to, I guess, the greatest question, which is so important in general. This question, if we want to talk about the ABCs of Tanakh, this is one of the most fundamental arguments you can find in Tanakh because it governs everything else. And that is, how exactly did this miracle occur? And we're at the very beginning of Tanakh, of Nach itself. We've finished the Torah at this point. This is the first time now that an open miracle is occurring. Right up till now, all we've had is the command. That's perek Aleph. We had the Meraglim. That's perek Beis. Now we have the crossing of the Jordan, which is going to be in our first miracle. So this is the first time the Mefarshim struggle and grapple with what happens in miracles. So I'd like to just unpack it together with you a little bit over here. And we're going to have two camps of thought. And these two camps of thought will in fact provide a framework for understanding any other miracle in the rest of Nach, which is why it's so important. I found this so fascinating the first time I stumbled upon this. And so it starts off with the Ralbag. The Ralbag is the Gersonides. That's the academic way of saying it. Rav Levi ben Gershon. Rav Levi ben Gershon was a fascinating individual. If you have a little bit of time, please take a moment to listen to, we did a series on Sunday morning about understanding the Mefarshim. We spent an entire 1 hour just on Rav Levi ben Gershon. He was a phenomenal person, a mathematician, a philosopher, besides his Jewish studies as well. He, in fact, is credited with creating Jacob's staff, which was a precursor to the sextant in terms of measuring distances, interstellar distances. In fact, if you take a look at the stamp from the state of Israel, you see a rendition of him with Jacob's staff, where there's two little poles on that staff, and based on the distance between them, you can work out the relative distance when gazing at stars. Really, a world-class astronomer, world-class mathematician, and he also wrote a commentary on Nach, phenomenal. And one of the things that he does, which is just in terms of his style, it's just worthwhile realizing, is he writes at the end of every section what he calls ta'alot, which are the takeaways from this as well. They're not just philosophical, some of them are halachic. Some people don't realize the Ralbag wrote halacha on sections of Tanakh, so he'll explain the basic of each section, and then at the end he'll write all the lessons to be learned from the section. So the end of the Jordan section, which he puts at the end of Perek Dalet, because he groups Perek Gimel and Dalet together, one of the things he says is he discusses miracles, because he's trying to grapple with this. And understanding the context of his life is important to understanding how he explains things, because he comes deeply from the camp of rationalists, which means to say he's in the camp of people like the Rambam as well, not the spiritualist. So he's not a Kabbalist in that respect, very much a rationalist, and so he's going to grapple from his scientific perspective. How do you swallow this? That's the question that he's asking. So his observation is very simple. He says like this: Ki lo yischadesh b'mavsim davar chadash. There's no such thing as a new physics, a new moment in time where things can change. When Moshe Rabbeinu says, if Hashem will create a new creation, when did Moshe Rabbeinu ask for that? When he wanted the earth to swallow up Korach, he says, Im Bria Yivra Hashem. Hashem will create a new creation. So Rava in the Gemara, commenting on that pasuk in Korach, says, Ein kol chadash tachas hashemesh, which is it was a pasuk in Koheles. There's no new things under the sun. So in a certain sense, Rava was saying, it doesn't make sense that God would create a new creation to facilitate the destruction of Korach. He says, V'chein lo yituar ba'asiyas davar ma'shayam etzil soser atzmoi. Hashem will not create a existent which will be internally contradictory. And he goes on to describe, like, let's say, a triangle which doesn't have 180 degrees, right? Or he goes on to say, let's say, Aish, which is a kar, which is going to be fire, which is cold. God works within the framework of physics, and he will not create something which goes outside of the realm of physics. It says, and therefore, how do miracles occur? So you're going to say, look, I have to read Tanakh, right? And I have to believe what happened is not allegorical, it's not metaphorical, it really actually happened. So how could it be that God created a system in which seas split and rivers stop? That doesn't make sense. Suns stop. We'll get there, God willing, later on. Right? There's a lot of things, stones falling from the heavens. There's a lot of crazy things that we're going to read about in the next chapters. How does that work precisely? He says, "Nomar," in the third paragraph, "Shekvar yidme shenemar she'ein hanachas hamayim biltini garim davar chadash." The fact that water doesn't flow downwards, that's not a new thing. He says, "Ki kvar yikre bozeh lamayim k'shiyeh lohem davar moneh me'atnua ve'esher shechidash shemisparach b'moifes ha'avir b'samach lamayim ha'im geshem sefiri av." He says, we know that water doesn't flow when there's something pushing against it. It is very likely there was a high-pressure system, perhaps even like a thick fog of sorts, or wind that was blowing against the water, which is preventing the water from flowing down. He's saying this, God doesn't just stop rivers. God has facilities to stop rivers. And they are high-pressure systems, and they are rain, and they are winds, meaning God is going to use everything he has already to make sure that this is going to fall within the purview of physics. God doesn't just snap his fingers and stop nature. God created nature. He wanted nature to work. So if something's going to stop, it has to be within the framework of nature. He's not going to create something which doesn't work internally. That's his observation, which means that any time you see a miracle then in Tanakh, it is God using the forces of physics in a way which is rationally explainable as well. So you say to yourself, well, if that's rationally explainable, have you not diminished what the miracle is then in a sense? Because you can just explain it away, and scientists are doing this every day today. They're trying to explain away all the miracles in the Bible, so then in a certain sense, we're left with nothing. Says the Ralbag, I know, I'm a deeply religious person. I just believe in science too. Right? So what Ralbag says, you know what the miracle is? It happened when he said, God said it's going to happen. And that, by the way, let's come back for a moment. Yehoshua said to them, tomorrow something's going to happen. It wasn't like he's saying, oh, looking at the weather, this reminds me of the one time that I saw the water stop in the sink. He's like, and quickly, let's go. No, God told him yesterday. He says, tomorrow you're going to walk through the Jordan, which means to say that the miracle is that this system occurred at just the right moment, which should not be discounted. The Malbim goes to town with this. The Malbim says, I don't understand. The Malbim goes on and says, you know what it means? That means that God never creates anything ex nihilo. There's nothing, which is the conservation of matter and the conservation of energy. There's no such thing which is going to be anew. That's what Rava was asking about Korach and Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu used an unusual word. He didn't say im Yetzira, Yetzira Hashem, but im Bria Yivra Hashem. The word Bria usually means ex nihilo. Right? There's different stages of creation. Bria means actual creation, and Yetzirah means formulation, right? Taking that clay and making it into something. He didn't use that word. He used the earlier word. That's what Rava was saying. How could it be that he created something afresh? But once you have it, God can do whatever he wants. He can snap his fingers any times he wants to stop this as well. And therefore the Malvin says, let's go over here. At the very bottom of on source 11, page 4 lines from the bottom, he says in the middle of the line, stopping a river or a sea is not ex nihilo creation. It's just playing with what he already has. And he can do whatever he wants because he created it. Well, why are you limiting God? Why should God be bound by the rules he created? At certain times, he can suspend them if it's necessary. Right? God is not limited to have to operate within the realm of physics. Right? He can do it without you having to explain high-pressure systems. That's the Malbim says over here. This is going to be a debate which is going to govern every miracle we see in Tanakh. You see something happening, we're going to say, can you explain that within the realm of physics? And it's just about when it occurred, based on when it was predicted to occur, like the real bug. Or no, God doesn't need any license to change the world that he created. He's not creating something new. He's just stopping or playing with the world based on what he sees fit at this time. I generally think that we have been educated based on the Malbim in general. In the school system, we're generally educated based on the Malbim, which is the more Kabbalistic school of thought. It's worthwhile noting that for some people are rational thinkers, and they appreciate the Ralbag as well. There's two distinct traditions in Judaism, and we're going to have to explain this throughout Tanakh. Notice who is usually going to be in the defendant's stand more in explaining Tanakh, the Malbim or the Ralbag? Almost always the Ralbag, because the Malbim can say, great, God just did something else. God just stopped the sun. No problem. Whereas the Ralbag will say, suns don't stop. Right? So we're going to have to get there, God willing, in a few parakim time. When that does happen, the Tanakh describes the sun stopping, so we have to figure out how does that exactly work within the framework of physics, which the Ralbag will explain, God willing, when we get there. But this is going to be the same thing with the Jordan. Now, just as an interesting historical aside, because it is important to appreciate this, because we live in the world of physics as well, and appreciating the Ralbag's approach. Because some of us will dismiss it and say it's belittling, but just to appreciate this for a moment. I put onto page 5 a list of the recorded earthquakes in the area of the Jordan, or in the area of Israel. And you'll notice there's an extraordinary amount of earthquakes throughout the course of history, some of them going back well over 2,000 years in recorded history, and I assume there were more. This is just what we have as recorded throughout history. The most recent one being the most significant one. There's been small ones in the last decades, we remember, but a very significant one was in 1927. That's not so long ago. That's 98 years ago. It's well recorded, well documented in history, well, before we get there, why are there so many earthquakes in Israel? I mean, that's not the kind of thing, you're going back in, let's say, New York history. You don't see that amount of earthquakes in recorded history in New York, and the answer is because that Israel is on what's called the Jordan Rift Valley, right? So it actually moves its way all the way down. These are the shift of the tectonic plates is along the eastern side of Israel. So if you look at the map at the bottom of page 5, the Arabian plates, which is to the east of Israel, are moving upwards, and the Mediterranean plates are moving downwards, and Israel is moving downwards, which means slowly but surely the two are rubbing against each other. And the Jordan Valley, in fact, is the Rift Valley. That's where the tectonic plates are shifting away from each other. If you want to trace it, just it's fascinating to trace it down, it moves down the Horn of Africa, down the east coast of Africa, and actually where I grew up in South Africa, the end of the Jordan Rift Valley is actually in South Africa. So that tectonic plate shift is all the way along the east coast of Africa, moving its way down. You can see where it actually meets. You can see the Rift Valley, which means to say is that pressure and that shifting spot is why it is rife with earthquakes. And unfortunately in Israel, one of the emergency preparations that Israel is always doing is not about terrorism, but about earthquakes. Right? There's a specific team designated to deal with earthquakes because of this. Where unfortunately we seem due to be, for one, and that's why I talk about this, because of just the history, if you look at the years. Now, let's go back to 1927. God forbid, Hashem should protect us. But let's go back to the one that happened in 1927. Here's an article that's on the Center for Israel Education. It describes as follows in source 12. A major earthquake struck Jericho just after 3 p.m. This is on July 11th, 1927. By the way, that's almost to the day now. Okay, so just we're on July 10th right now. So this is 98 years back from tomorrow. It killed 300 and 500 people, and between 300 and 500 people, injuring at least 700 others. Measured at a magnitude of 6.3 on the Richter scale, the quake lasted about 5 seconds. The epicenter is initially believed close to Jericho, and is known as the Jericho earthquake of 1927. But later research concludes the epicenter is 30 miles farther south by the Dead Sea. So it's placing where it occurred as well. It is worthwhile taking a look at this picture, which I was able to find. This is a picture which is stored in the Library of Congress, right, so the United States. And this is, in fact, it's labeled Palestine Events, the earthquake of July 11th, 2027. The Jordan flow checked by caving in of the riverbanks trees thrown into midstream. For 21 hours, the Jordan River stopped flowing in 1927 as a function of that particular earthquake as well. So just to put things into, this is measurable human history. Just understand this. This is not 2,000 years ago, based on some, we're talking about, this is a picture in the Library of Congress, this happened. So when the Ralbag says that the Jordan River stops, and it can stop, and there's physics to making it stop, it does. We've seen it happen, right? It has happened in the span of a lifetime or two that this occurs. So the Ralbag's point over here about things working within the realm of physics, that's not a dream, it's not far out, it's something which is very tangible and can be touched. So it's sometimes helpful in a world of great science and a world of research, to appreciate the significance of timing and God orchestrating events, even if they operate within the framework of nature as well. There was an excellent article by Ari Satcher, who's one of the lead scientists on the Iron Dome, and he wrote an article last September about the statistical likelihood of all the interceptions that have been occurring. And he points out that it's simply it's preposterous, the level of interceptions. This was before the Iran. In Israel, they ordered 60,000 body bags for the war with Iran. Right? How many that we had? We had 40 fatalities. Right? There were many injured, and that's terrible. But understand, they ordered 60,000 body bags. Right? So understanding the statistical improbability of what's been going on over the last few years in the war with Hezbollah, we ourselves sometimes, because we understand the mechanism, then we ourselves think that we can own it. And once we own it, it's not miraculous. But the Ralbag is not saying that. The Ralbag is saying you can understand the mechanism and it's still unbelievable. And that's what's happening over here as well. So no matter how much you're going to explain away and point to history and science, great. But God did it when He said He's going to do it. At the moment they desperately needed it, that's what happened. And I think it's helpful for us to reread history from a perspective of this, because we're so ensconced in this way of thinking. And I'd like to conclude with the following observation, and that is as follows. We've spent so much time right now trying to understand how this occurred. But note that Tanakh does not tell us. Tanakh just says, they stood up, Neid Echad, what, as one pillar. Tanakh doesn't tell us how it occurred. Maybe to Tanakh, that's actually less relevant than the more important question, which is, why this occurred. You see, religion is not interested in always the mechanics. You can figure it out yourself. You'll write a paper on that and you'll figure it out. Tanakh is more interested in why this occurred. And these are the two psukim which tell us explicitly in our perek. And here they are. We'll close with this. Pasuk Zion says, this is on page 7. Vayomer Hashem el Yehoshua, Hayom hazeh achel gadelcha be'enei kol Yisrael. Today I'm going to make your name great in the eyes of all of Israel. Asher yedon ki kasher ayisi im Moshe eyemach. I'm going to do this to give you the credentials to be the leader. Just like I was with Moshe, I'll be with you. Think about it. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. Poor Yehoshua, right? Following in the shadow of Moshe Rabbeinu? It's impossible. He says, don't worry. He split the sea. I'm going to make you take you through the waters of the Jordan. That's reason number one. Reason number two. When Yehoshua turns to the people, he says, now you'll know, Kikel chai b'kerechem. There's a living God in your midst. V'areish yarish mipneichem es ha'knani, es ha'chiti, es ha'chivi, v'aprizi, es ha'girgashi, v'amari, v'ayevusi. People, you should know, God lives among you. And like He's doing this, He's going to make you vanquish all your enemies. So don't, in a sense, be afraid. Don't be fearful of what you're about to encounter. If you think about this from this perspective, Tanakh is less interested in the how and is more interested in the why. And the why is the philosophy. The why is the theology of what it is. And we can figure out from today until tomorrow the how, but understand why. And that's what we're going to do. This concludes Perek Gimel. Thank you everybody for taking the time to come. I look forward to